Welcome. My name is Amy, and I will be your personal guide as together we explore strategies to improve your skills to make you a more effective leader. You've taken an important step in enhancing and expanding your ability to interact with others in a meaningful and impactful manner, and I want you to get everything you can out of this training. This training is designed so that you can take it at your own pace. Take your time, do the activities to ensure you will be able to put your new learning into practice. Learning alone will not make you successful. You must take action. It is only through the application of our knowledge that we can truly shine, and I know you can shine. We're in this journey together. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time with your questions or comments. I'm here for you. Now, before we get started, make sure you've printed off your training guide. This will help you capture all the key information you will need to put your learning into practice. I know, it may seem old school, but some of the latest research shows that writing out notes is the most effective way for adults to learn. So if you haven't printed out your guide yet, hit that pause button and go do that right now. All ready? Excellent. It's my pleasure to be your guide through this training. Let's begin. How to create cultural change. It is one thing to start a new job and have to learn all the tasks involved. It is another thing to learn and adjust to the culture of the company. Company culture refers to the way things get done and the way people interact with each other. It's the prevalent attitudes that employees share, the accepted practices for socializing while at work, and the daily structure that people follow. Your ability to navigate company culture often determines your success. But what if the culture is preventing you from achieving the task you've been hired to do? The process of cultural change. Many times, leaders are hired to make significant changes in a company, and those changes usually require a shift in the existing culture in order to take effect. You're brought in to streamline a process, introduce new protocols, or create a new product. All of these tasks require employees to change their current way of doing and thinking. You have to change the culture in order to be successful in the task change. So how do you do that? You do it by following established strategies for creating cultural change. Don't expect to change anything overnight. It's a long and challenging process. Step 1, education. It all begins with education. People must understand why the change in culture is needed. This is an important first step. All change starts with understanding. You need to bring people together and help them understand the reasons for the change and what role they will play in that process. Try to provide multiple opportunities for people to contribute to the ideas for the implementation process. This helps create buy-in and allows people a chance to provide feedback and share concerns that will need to be addressed in later steps. Getting everything out in the open early on prevents the need to backtrack later. For example, present what needs to be changed and allow input on how that change will take place. You may already think that you have the solution, but by involving others, you can be made aware of any current cultural roadblocks, and you may be provided with ways for overcoming those obstacles. 2, resources. The next step is to provide resources. Inevitably, change requires shifting resources away from some areas and towards others. Resources might be financial, equipment, or human capital. It is making sure that you are providing everything that will be needed for the change to take place. Nothing is more frustrating than being told to make a change, or even wanting to make a change, but not having the resources made available to do it. Whether it is a small change or a big change, changing one's way of thinking and doing is a significant task. It is important to be aware of where the resources will be coming from. If something that employees value will lose resources, you need to be prepared to address that and know that that's an unintended consequence. Help everyone focus on what will be gained rather than what's being lost. If possible, find alternatives that will help compensate for what people feel is being lost, and be prepared for people to grieve during that transition. It doesn't mean these folks won't get on board, but they just may need a little time to adjust to the change. Remember, as Rowan Dredge once said, values determine culture, culture determines behavior, behavior determines your outcomes. Step 3 is motivation. In business, you must facilitate ways for employees to buy into forthcoming changes. Early adopters are frequently highlighted as a way to create positive peer pressure for others to make the change. One of the key motivational strategies is being able to witness success from a change. Somebody, at minimum the leader, but at best when there are people at all levels, has to walk the talk before others will follow. Motivation needs to be subtly incorporated into every step of the process. But here is where you really highlight those that are making the transition and the rewards for everyone that emerging from those changes. The focus is on success and using motivational strategies to help everyone feel like they are a valued contributor to that success. Whether those contributions are current or in the future, the more you make everyone feel like a winner, the more supportive they will be as the changes continue to become mainstream. Step 4 is governance. Written policies need to be created to support any system, process, or cultural change. Just as education is always the first step, governance is always the last step. The smoothest and most successful change starts at the bottom and works its way up to the top. Once you have people committed to implementing the change desired, you reinforce the change with policy. Of course, this generally includes consequences for anyone who doesn't fall into line. Change in action. I once worked with a group of people of about 24 who were volunteering on the local level of a national organization. Think of it like a franchise model. I was dealing with an individual store, and the larger corporation was preparing to institute sweeping changes that would result in major staffing shifts. There was a team of us working with each of these local groups to help them through the transition process. Well, most of my colleagues shared very little information at the start. I made it a point to share everything I knew. I laid everything out on the table, even though much of the changes were still being determined. I told my group what was being considered and why they were considering it. We had open discussions about the impact of these potential changes and explored ways we might be proactive in addressing some of the root causes of those changes. As my group explored ways to be proactive, I worked to find them all the additional resources I could. What was the established statistical data they needed to explore different avenues? What are the other models they could look at? What would their options be for involvement based on different scenarios? We started to talk about what they would need before, during, and after the change process. And we worked to secure all of those resources. Whatever came down the pipe, my group was going to be ready. Because my group was well-informed and prepared with resources, they felt like they had some control over the situation. They were identifying ways to implement the changes in ways that they all felt comfortable with. They were motivated to make the changes in a way that would best serve their group. They all felt like they had a personal stake in the outcome of the transition and were embracing the process rather than trying to fight it. While all the other groups were motivated to keep the status quo, my group was motivated to make the most of these changes and used it as an opportunity to change long-held traditions in favor of pursuing new opportunities that aligned with the specific needs of their group. When the final word came down and we were given the list of required changes, my group was ready. They understood what these changes were all about. They understood how they could implement these changes in a way that provided them the greatest benefit. They had done much of the legwork needed for implementation. They were ready to roll. Within a couple of weeks from the changes being announced, my group had completely transformed the way they operated and had met all of the benchmarks assigned to them. The other groups were shocked. They tried to start with governance and just address questions as they were raised. They had to constantly backtrack to hit various education points. They were scrambling to determine what resources they needed and where to find them. The members of these groups were angry, defensive, and defiant. They didn't understand the reason behind the changes. They didn't understand how they may operate successfully in this new paradigm. Lack of knowledge leads to fear, and fear leads to protest and rebellion. Because my group was involved with the change process from day one, and because we started with education, then gathered the resources, my group was motivated to accept and implement the changes that governance brought. And they were excited about doing it. Understand and working through the process of cultural change can save endless time and frustration. My group became the example that others then worked to replicate. Putting it all together. If generational movements can make progress on a cultural change within an entire country within the span of a decade, there's no reason you can't be successful in making a change within your company, your life, or your family. Hopefully in significantly less time than a countrywide level change. Not everyone will be convinced that action is needed, and some will rebel against your effort. But if the vast majority of people involved can come to understand the issues and respect that the decisions are being made for the betterment of the company and its employees, change can be made. Cultural changes always take time and continued effort. However, the rewards can far outweigh the battles. Just because we have always done something a certain way doesn't mean we should continue doing it that way. There are times when we need to look into the future and assess our practices. Will they continue to be sustainable, effective, and efficient? I challenge you to be proactive. Examine the resources you routinely use. Will they still be available to you in the future? If not, what can you do today to start transitioning to a new way of getting things done without that resource, or by using resources in a different way? I challenge you to protect your values while allowing the culture to be flexible as it changes and adapts to new efforts. Your choice. So what is the specific changes you need to make in your culture? You must identify the changes before you start the process. Write these changes down on your note paper. Once you have listed your changes, identify how you will go about educating your employees on the challenges being faced and the need for these changes, and how these changes will benefit everyone. Make sure to ask for input on other options to addressing the challenges, or for suggestions on the best way to implement the changes you have planned. Continue by listing all the things you need to do to work through the 4-step process of change. Write these down. Use this list to remind you of the order of steps and to check off things as you complete them. This is how you will achieve success. Take your time, work through the process, and the change will follow. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to let me guide you through this training. I hope you found it useful, and I really hope that you stick to your plan and start taking small steps to changing the culture you operate within.